So just what am I looking for in a dungeon crawler? And if you've had the chance to follow some of my other board gaming vlogs and posts over on my blog, I'm a big enthusiast of dungeon crawlers. I won't say that I can't get enough of dungeon crawlers, but it's not hard to sell me on them. And there's this duality in that I love miniatures. Wargamer Fritz, playing miniature war games, combined with being a Dungeons and Dragons enthusiast, going into dungeons and fighting dragons, the two meet. Although I do enjoy overland board games like Runebound, so not quite a dungeon crawler, but within that framework. With that, building a checklist. What are some of the things that I personally look for when I'm evaluating a dungeon crawler? Because while it begins with the rules, the rule set doesn't have to be perfect. I'm not a Euro gamer. I'm not worried about ore and wool and worker placement and management. But at the same time, I want the rules to be able to evoke a feeling, to be able to pull something out, to capture what they're selling on the cover of the box or what the artwork is selling. So I want good rules, but I'm willing to overlook. I'm able to overlook a couple of points that might be a little bit loose or places where things slow down a little bit. The rules are important, but for me, that's not make or break. The first thing that I look at is diversity of character classes. I want some of the usual familiar character classes, the fighter, the wizard, the rogue, the barbarian, but I'd like some character classes that are different or not usually packed in, say like a druid. Because with that diversity, not only does it allow other friends to play the game, I mean, one of the reasons why I play board games so much is for the social interaction. Everyone has a place at my table. You know, the game is made for 4 people, but we've got 8 characters to choose from, and 8 people want to play. Well, we're sitting down and we're doing 8. And I also like that because when I do play solo, while I tend to play the same characters based on my player personality, I also like that diversity where I can mix things up. I can change things. And in terms of longevity, you know, this is important. We want to be able to revisit our titles and try out different strategies. Certainly, I want a lot of missions, but what's more important than the missions, because no matter how many there are, you are going to play through them, whether it takes you 6 months, 8 months, a year. When you have diverse character classes, that allows things to mix up the strategy. That allows to explore the same scenarios over and over again. So that's the first thing that I look at. What are we talking about character-wise? Second to this, what I'd like to see, and this is a little bit harder because you certainly don't want any spoilers, but looking at the miniatures or looking at other aspects, I like the idea of boss fights or specialized monsters. Yes, absolutely, there's going to be some sort of trash mob to plow through. Maybe that's a bunch of giant rats. Maybe that's undead, depends on the theme. Maybe it's a bunch of zombies, looking at it from that perspective. That bulk has its place in the game because you want to wear down the players or you want to have things to challenge and you want to have that feeling of being overwhelmed. But I also want to have some unique monsters to fight, unique ones that pop up. Now, this is where things jump into the rules. I was just saying the rules aren't important, but they are important from this perspective. What we see from game designers and what I notice, and I'm certainly not a game designer, so commenting on this is a little bit out of place. I find now poor game design are concepts like get hit by paralysis and lose a turn. I don't want to lose a turn and be powerless for that turn, meaning I don't want to have all of my choices taken away. Skip my turn. So it's the beginning of the turn. We're playing the game. I get hit with the paralysis. Look, because I'm up there as the fighter / barbarian / tank. And now I'm sitting around out of the game, not only for the rest of this turn, but for the next turn. I understand the idea. I understand the effect, but this is not Dungeons and Dragons where things are a little bit more fluid, or there's ways to remove it with other interactions. I'd rather see you're paralyzed, you can only attack or defend, or your movement is a little bit slower. Punish me for it. Absolutely. Special conditions, poison, punish me for it. Not happy about it, punish me for it. But don't take away my entire choice. So when I look for, or don't take away that I can't do anything, give me some sort of action. I look at the monsters and I say, are there a couple of unique monsters? Not only in looks, but just something that stands out. And then finally, what I want to see, and we're seeing this more and more in newer titles, and it's getting out of hand, completely out of hand, in a good way, boss fights. I want bonus points if it's a dragon. I want to see some sort of, at the middle or the end of a quest, a big, big boss fight for me to go after. Absolutely. I love dragons. The funny thing is, if you look at, and I pushed this up to my archive under the board gaming playlist, I ranked all the games that I have fighting dragons. And some of these are physical dragons, like in Kingdom Death Monster. Some of them were dragons virtually, like in Runebound. You fight Margrath, represented by a token, although I swap it out for a miniature. Everything in between. Temple of Elemental Evil, Dungeon Saga. I want to fight a dragon, but that represents, and the hardest dragon I've ever faced, and I'm not going to have any spoilers here. I have about 16 games where you fight dragons. The number one, the hardest thing, makes Tiamat look like baby cakes, makes anything in D&D look like absolute, like, yeah, bro, that's nothing. Kingdom Death Monster. That's all we need to say on that. But from that perspective, I want to have some sort of boss fight. I want to have some sort of something special in the end to fight winner take all. And on a side note, this is why I love Dark Souls, as clunky as it is. Why I love Dark Souls. There is a dragon to fight in that. Technically multiple dragons, but there are dragons because you gear up, you fight the trash mobs, and then you go in for the boss fight. You go in for that boss fight. So that winner take all too, that really, really, really excites me. So from that perspective, that's the criteria, the primary criteria I'm looking at. Now, adding to that is I want to see an effective leveling and loot system. It doesn't have to necessarily be complex. Examples, say like Gloomhaven, are a little bit complex, but we also have very, very simplified, and I say simplified in a good way, Descent 2nd Edition. Descent 2nd Edition, where you got a couple of magic items, you could flip a few cards, you powered up. It worked well for what it does. I want to feel like I'm increasing in power. I want to feel like I've got some items. I want to feel like I'm improving a little bit in some way. So that's also important for the development. The last piece, and I say last, but it might be the first because this is entirely a personal perspective. The artwork, the dungeon tiles, the components, it has to work for me. It has to be something visually that pulls me into the game. And I leave that for last because we all have different ideas and aspects on it, and those might change. A perfect example, I've always been very straightforward and honest with you guys, really appreciating the feedback and the time that you take to listen to my vlogs. And I'm honored that you're part of this gaming thing, part of my gaming life. I'm honored to be a part of your gaming life. So I'm able to say, you know what, I was wrong on that, or I evolved. I take that back. Descent 3rd Edition, and I'm full impulse control is activated. I'm doing my best to resist Descent 3rd Edition. But from that perspective, I'm liking a lot what I'm seeing so far. And the artwork initially with the release just did not do it for me. I looked at this and I said, no, it's just not working. I mean, it's not working. And now that I see the actual components in play and how it all comes together, I'm looking and saying, hey, this looks pretty good. I mean, there's a couple of wonky things, but that's personal opinion. But if I look at it overall, certainly the design of the miniatures reflecting a new evolution in the Descent/Terranoth universe, I'm like, hey, I could get behind this. I need to resist this further. So I push artwork out there because that really depends. But I do have to say it has to work for you. So if we're building that checklist, what are those important points that pull you in? What are those important points where you're resisting everything you can and you're like, I don't need another dungeon crawler. But this time, it's different.